Brothers and sisters, President Nelson has asked that I handle the business of the solemn assembly for which we are gathered today. This is an occasion of great significance for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints throughout the world. Dating from October 10th, 1880, when John Taylor was sustained to succeed Brigham Young,
Travis Wayne Goodsell. In 1887, the United States Congress passed and the President signed the Edmunds-Tucker Act. It shut down the corporations of the Perpetual Immigration Fund and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They ceased to exist on the face of the earth. All authority gone. No longer to be called president. Official Declaration number 1, verse 11. Hilarious. And because of that, when Heber J. Grant reincorporated the church, he released a new edition of the Doctrine and Covenants in 1921. This took out the doctrine from the Doctrine and Covenants, called the Lectures on Faith, and they had to not have John Taylor's revelations on polygamy, and so the church that Brigham Young founded and was succeeded by John Taylor and then ceased to exist on the face of the earth despite Nelson's solemn assembly by Irene. They claim to be succession from that. Sorry. It was an illegal operation, criminal operation, and was shut down. It was destroyed. It fell. The great and abominable church fell. And there's been other great and abominable churches that has fallen throughout history. Thus, the topic of a great and abominable church in Scripture is a pattern of wickedness. So Babylon fell. That was a great and abominable church, the great and abominable Christ. Constantine, that fell. Great and abominable church with the great and abominable Christ. So that's what happens when corrupt churches are destroyed. They fall. They cease to exist. And of course you still have members that survive, and then they go on to try to resurrect it, like Heber J. Grant did, as they were able to claim continued succession, though not authorized, through Wilford Woodruff, then Lorenzo Snow, then Joseph F. Smith Sr., and then Heber J. Grant. And so, as the Book of Mormon tells us, that in the future, a great and abominable church will fall in the latter days, which means it had to be resurrected. It's going to be exactly like Joseph's church. That's what I was told as a kid, that Lucifer's church is an exact copy of the Mormon church, our church. Hilarious. And I was like, oh, really? So if I were to go into a satanic church, they would have the sacrament with the bread and wine and have prayers and hymns and and Sunday school lessons in primary. And then a temple. I cannot laugh. And a temple with the names, signs, and tokens of the holy priesthood. Just hilarious. And so they'd call their God, even though it's Lucifer, they'd call him Jesus too. I was not far off. Not far off, as funny as it is. And so, what happened? Well, Joseph Smith's church fell. With his death, it fell. But in that particular case, it was usurped and overthrown, rather than being wicked from the beginning, as Brigham Young's was. Brigham Young was the one who overthrew Joseph's church. And so I've gone over this with you, but we're going to go over it again because we now have a pattern for what's coming, or what's actually in progress. First, you have an infiltration. It's where Brigham and Heber, in this particular case, made a conscious effort to destroy Joseph's church. So they joined with the purpose of overthrowing it eventually. And then after they joined, they were missionaries. And so they went around talking about the Book of Mormon to people and lied about it. Said it's all about Jesus, another testament of Jesus, and they're Christian. That's why the 1838 history came out, to put everybody straight in the Mormon church, because those evil people were Brigham and Heber. And so they converted a whole bunch of their buddies and increased in number and became populous, numerous. Apparently he's Mormon. Not happy. He's calling me anti-Mormon and getting upset. Anti-Mormon does not mean violent. But Mormons sure do get violent when they use that term against ex-Mormons, those who actually study. Nonetheless, once they increased in number, they needed to take over leadership positions. So they coup authority. This was in 1838. And the method in which they did it was an election fraud there in Missouri. They had their headquarters, which imitated, they called it Adam on Diamond. I've done the videos for you, done all the research, and they gathered all the Danites together and went down to overthrow the election, make their guy win. And a war broke out. It's called the Mormon War. And with this war, they were able to lie to those who they were threatening into believing that Joseph Smith orchestrated it all. And that's what got Joseph locked up in Liberty Jail. And Brigham Young, having now cooed the authority, was taking a major role, as he had a great number of followers, Danites, who would follow him. He took over the Quorum of the 12. And then as the Civil War eventually stopped, they didn't have control over the church yet. That failed. And so then they had to assassinate Joseph Smith and Hiram and Samuel by poisoning after the Carthage jail. And then, having taken out those key people, they were then able to take those who would follow him, as he had the numbers, he had the might that makes right, which is a fallacious argument. Nonetheless, when you threaten people, what are people doing? The United States didn't shut them down. And so, yeah, that's the final coup, the takeover. And so, that's the pattern. A whole new religion emerges with the infiltration. And so we're looking at the latter days, talking about the destruction of America. Joseph Smith even talked about it, that these evil people, part of which became the Danites of Brigham Young, are going to overthrow America. And I've been exposing it, and the church isn't happy. But we've seen the election frauds. We've had technically 3 major problems, because the midterms in 2018 was a sweep of the House by the progressives. And so it was just 2016 with the whole Facebook scandal, Cambridge Analytica for the election fraud there. And then you have the 2021, blatantly obvious. Is it still being investigated? Seriously? We all witnessed it live. Nonetheless, and then you had the war. After we didn't quite have a war after 2016, and so the war was with the 2020, the January 6th war, and it was partial. They quit and gave up. As we learned from the hearings, they could have gone all the way and just overrun the whole Capitol if they knew what the congresspersons were and where they were and how close they were to them, etc. But they've told us that was a dry run, we're going to do it again. And so when are they doing it again? We've already been told. The 2022 midterms. They're going to plan to purposely overthrow the election if they don't legitimately win. And they never legitimately win, they always have to cheat. But they got the Supreme Court now, who cooed the Supreme Court. And so you can see the patterns that are involved, just like what was done to Joseph's church. And then we have what they're hoping for is an actual civil war. There have been cries from MAGA and white supremacists for a civil war. They keep trying to talk it up so that it will happen. And if Trump gets indicted, which he needs to, we cannot let terrorists threaten us to not indict a criminal. War is also on the doorsteps. They've already threatened FBI buildings throughout the nation with just the search and seizure. And so if they succeed in the election fraud as they plan, if they succeed in a civil war, we've seen it throughout our history. Abraham Lincoln, assassinated. John F. Kennedy, assassinated. Joseph Smith, Hiram, assassinated. This is what they do. So we should expect to see assassinations so that the government can completely be taken over and controlled by these bad guys who've been plotting this for 200 years. This is what we're looking at there. But with the church, they, having come from Brigham Young, they're the bad guys too. They're helping in the government part of it. But I've been warning you, they're also going to do it to this church. They control it, but they want nothing to do with it because it's not really their true thing. Because they don't want Joseph Smith. They turned him into a Christian because they didn't like him as a Jew. They don't like the Book of Mormon. Heber C. Kimball knew it was coded. And so, yeah, the prophets were surprised when I presented that in the federal filing that I did. I did videos on it, and Mormons were like, code? What's code? It's like, are you seriously that much younger than I am to not know that the 1981 edition of the Doctrine and Covenants was decoded partially, even though the church says fully? My goodness. But yeah, that's purposely why they've done away with the Book of Mormon now under Nelson. They no longer push the Book of Mormon. You know, they still talk about it, missionaries still go out and talk about it, but their focus is all about Jesus now. And he's the great and abominable Christ of Constantine. He doesn't exist. He was messianic literature, that prophesying of the Jews as fiction, prophetic fiction that I keep trying to tell you. And Constantine made them real, literal history, for the purpose of destroying. And that's what the church is doing. They're pushing Mormons to the brink, getting rid of as many Mormons as possible. They've done an excellent job. But the hardcore, they're getting them to commit crimes for them. And in so doing, destroy the church that way too. And so, yes, Oaks specifically is pushing for polygamy. Nelson made the change to the law of chastity for polygamy to return, because they want the criminal organization of Brigham Young back. And in so doing, it will get the church legally in trouble. And what happens when the church is legally busted? Well, 1887 ceases to exist on the face of the earth. No more Joseph Smith, no more Book of Mormon. Because you can't have things that are understood as criminal. And so, see what they're doing? See how they're going to destroy this church and take down Joseph and the Book of Mormon with it? See, the Book of Mormon and Joseph are all about the latter days, warning us of what they're going to do. They don't want to keep it for the millennial reign of peace. It's not really peace if you've if you're a criminal, because everybody wants to take your power away from you. And so you have to live in fear that somebody's going to try to take it from you. And so you have to hire guards that are loyal and hope that you pay them well enough so that they can remain loyal. And then you got to put your friends in key positions of power so that they don't want your power, but there's always more power that people want. It's never good enough, and blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, a corrupt organization cannot last for that particular reason. That's why Constantine fell, that's why Babylon fell, etc. And so, with the corruption, everybody will now associate the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with corruption, and thus Joseph and the Book of Mormon. Right, ex-Mormons? As I keep warning you and telling you, no. Brigham, Joseph and the Book of Mormon are dead and gone. You cannot use those criticisms that Brigham Young lied about. He purposely turned Joseph into a witch. He purposely turned Joseph into Christian, so that when people criticize the church, he just says, "Oh, Joseph is our founder." And then people go to Joseph. "Oh, yeah, I heard he's a rapist." And you get all those horrible things coming out because of Brigham Young's lies. He was the secret band of Gadianton within Joseph's church to overthrow it. The Council of 50 to overthrow the government if Joseph Smith succeeded in becoming president. They would have a backup to coup the church. So murder, assassinate the president and the vice president, which was Sidney Rigdon, was the running mate. And so we're running out of time, guys. Running out of time. Because it's right there in the Book of Mormon. I've been going over it with you when I talked about the code. But, yeah, next year, 2023, the bicentennial, oh, they were pissed. Got my other assassination attempt because of that. And that's why I keep reporting it to the judge in the counterclaim, which sends it to the Attorney General, I'm hoping. And it's supposed to by law. Is to protect myself by reporting what I witnessed as a pattern leading to another assassination attempt on me for this weekend. I'm hoping that I've stayed the assassination for the time until they let time pass and try it again, because the Attorney General's taking his time. And you see that with Trump. Attorney General's taking his time, so he's continuing to commit crimes. So, but this is life and death for me. All because I exposed it by believing in the prophets saying to study the Book of Mormon, and Joseph Smith is our founder. That which they were trying to destroy became the method by which I saw their fraud. But yeah, and the Civil War will get ugly because they've already talked about and already been doing targeting political figures. But yeah, with the church, they got to destroy that too. And maybe I'm the means of destroying the church. That's why they keep trying to assassinate me, is so that I would then report it and then hopefully get the Attorney General to finally lock him up. Satan is supposed to be bound for the millennium. Because Satan's a spirit, you can't actually bind him. And so who's his representative on earth? Exactly. He can be bound, just like John Taylor was bound and locked up and then died in prison. So I'm hoping, but Merrick Garland doesn't quite take the bait, I guess. Oh, our main witness was assassinated by the people he said was going to assassinate him? Oops. Oh well, we've got no case now. But yeah, if they don't get molested or made afraid, they'll just continue to do what they're doing, living in tyranny, making the laws more severe and strict and illegal and criminal. Who's stopping them? Nobody's stopping them. I mean, Nelson's created an idol god for Mormons. Nobody stopped him. He called himself the Antichrist. Nobody stopped him. He's even done insults that you can understand, calling you lazy learners, and you don't stop him. Brad Wilcox. Church stops that, and you guys don't keep it going. You know, all this sexual crimes going on here in Utah. It's still going, but nobody's going after the church. YouTube's shutting down my videos so that nobody can view any further. Nobody stops them. My past postings on the internet are all gone now. They're erased. Nobody's stopping them. I'm reporting all this stuff, but nobody stops them, and so they escalate. They get worse with the types of crimes they commit. That's what they do. So, it's the same old thing. Same old pattern. And that's what we're looking at. We've already seen the buildup when we saw that they didn't actually succeed with the election fraud, civil war, and cooing authority. But they're going to try it again. And if they succeed, then we'll see the assassinations and the official takeover, so that no one ever will run for president ever again. Similar to what Putin did. He came in, took over, was able to chip away at the Russian governmental system, and now is president until 2036. Even though he's got cancer, right? But yeah, China did it as well. He made himself emperor now. He's no longer President Xi. It's the XI. However, that's to be pronounced in Chinese, whether it's Mandarin or Cantonese. I don't remember which. Nelson would know. But yeah, he's now emperor. So we were supposed to call him Emperor G, or G, or whatever. And now he's threatening to coup Taiwan. He's even threatening Australia. What the hell with Australia? What did they do? So, yeah, and then once they get going, that'll embolden North Korea to then go into South Korea, his little war, little rocket man, because he's not one of the big boys. He can't take on America, but China and Russia can. So, but yeah, if you paid attention, Nelson has every intention of bringing Russians here to Utah. The lost 10 tribes returned to Zion. And what do Russians want with Utah? You forgot about Bear's Ears, huh? It's been so long since I reported on those. Yeah, Putin wants the uranium. And so that's why the Russians would come here after America is destroyed. is so that the mining could take place and Putin would have his uranium. That's what he was doing with Iran. That's why Trump negated the deal there with Iran and then negated the deal with Putin for the missiles. They know what they're doing. You got to pay attention. But the news isn't catching on. And that's disturbing. Because I watched All the President's Men last night. Those days are gone when we have journalists that take down a president. Actual investigation. None of this reporting of what poll numbers say about America's feelings. Oh, America doesn't like Biden. I guess Biden needs to change. If we tell Biden that his poll numbers are low, maybe he'll change. Dear God. And you think that MSNBC is in favor of Biden? Not when they do poll numbers showing Biden is not doing well. And if you don't understand poll numbers, they get 1,000 people, and it's the same 1,000 people over and over again, so they may not be the full 1,000, depending on whether they answer their phones or not, or emails or whatever they do it through nowadays. And they ask specifically worded questions, so that they can only give specifically worded answers. And that's why I could never answer, because the answer that I would give is not available. And they don't want those kinds of answers. And so that's why the polls are purposely rigged, to not represent America. And we witnessed how polls get really screwed up with the 2016 election. And that was also because of election fraud. But Facebook and social media were able to turn people that the news was not aware of. So, alrighty. And that's pretty much it. So, if you get up in your testimony meeting next week, not tomorrow, next week, just remember that may be the last time that you'll ever have the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith. And do I get to say I told you so? Probably not. The majority of us will be dead.